tuck the kids into bed and make sure the drapes are closed because we're about to get a little blue. Let's get started. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Thumb Together. My name is Andrew Fantasia, and today we're going to be talking about Avatar: The Way of Water together. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. Otherwise, I'll drown because I can't swim. The Way of Water got nothing to do with me. I'm more of a way of dry land kind of person. It's been a goddamn 13-year wait, and in that time, a Marvel universe was formed, a DC universe was formed and torn apart. Star Wars came back, Middle-earth came back twice, X-Men was rebooted and then it ended, and Spider-Man was rebooted and then ended, and then rebooted again. So much has happened since 2009, but the big blue day has finally arrived, and Avatar 2 exists. So did I think it was worth the extremely long wait? Well, if we're being honest, yeah, I think it was, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about is a cinematic or storytelling lesson we can take away from Avatar: The Way of Water. And I should forewarn you, the nature of this particular lesson is a very spoilery one. Not just spoilery for Avatar, but spoilery for all the films and shows that we're going to be talking about in this video. So just go into this forewarned, spoilers are everywhere. So with that out of the way, let's talk about one of my absolute favorite storytelling devices. Wait for it. The cliffhanger. I'm pretty sure I've gone on record many times and said this, but I love cliffhanger endings in movies. I love them because they don't happen often. So when one happens, it's rare and special. It carries with it a kind of promise. A promise that the story being told is simply too grand and too epic to be contained in a single motion picture. If cliffhangers were overused, yeah, they'd lose their specialness, and depending who you ask, they have been overused within the past decade. However, I'm of the mind that just the opposite has happened. I think that real cliffhangers, true cliffhangers, are slowly going extinct. But if I'm going to make any kind of sense here and not sound like some kind of maniac, I should probably start things off by explaining what I mean when I say true cliffhangers. First of all, let's define cliffhanger. A cliffhanger is a storytelling device that leaves the characters and/or situation in a dramatic state of uncertainty or peril, meant to incentivize the audience into coming back to hear or see the next chapter. I use the word chapter here because cliffhangers originally started as a literary device, and that's important for later, so remember that. One of the earliest and coolest examples of this is in the classic tale 1001 Nights. In the legend, there's a king named Shahryar, who is an absolute dickbag. Every day, Shahryar would force a virgin from his kingdom to marry him, then the following morning, he'd kill that virgin so that she could never be unfaithful to him. Rinse and repeat. Eventually, he ended up marrying a woman named Scheherazade, and Scheherazade was smart enough to find herself a loophole. At the end of their first night together, Scheherazade told King Shahryar a bedtime story. It was a story she'd made up, so he'd obviously never heard it before. All through the night, she weaved this incredible tale and had the king's undivided attention. Just as the sun was starting to rise, she stopped, right in the middle of an intense, suspenseful scene. The king pleaded with her to continue, but she told him it was too late. Dawn was breaking, and as per law of the kingdom, it was time for her to be put to death. But Shahryar, ravenous to know what happens next, allowed her execution to be delayed by one more day. The following night, she continued her story, and as dawn was breaking, she did it again, and again, and again. And thus, using the art of the cliffhanger, Scheherazade was able to keep herself alive for 1001 nights. after which point the king realized he had fallen in love with her, so he abolished his rule and just full-on made her his queen, and they live happily ever after, which is really weird and stupid if you think about it, because the guy is still an unforgivable, murderous monster, but that's neither here nor there. In case you can't tell, as a storyteller myself, Scheherazade is one of my literary heroes because her story and her legend are just so effing cool. Anyway, taking everything we've learned so far, let's all agree before moving forward that a cliffhanger should be something that leaves the characters and plot lines in a state of unresolved suspense. There's unfinished business left on the table, and more importantly, the rest of the story is forthcoming, and that is a given. A New Hope ends with Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star and having a big ol' metal party with his new friends. Yes, the Empire is still out there and we never actually see Vader die, but all the plot lines have been tied up. There's no unfinished business. By the end of The Empire Strikes Back, it's a whole different ballgame. Luke has interrupted his Jedi training, promising to return. Han Solo has been frozen in carbonite, and the rebels vow to rescue him. Vader has dropped the bombshell of all bombshells, and we, the audience, are left wondering whether or not it's true. And looming over all of it is a creepy, evil emperor that we know is going to have to be dealt with sooner or later. That's about as true a cliffhanger as you can get. Let's keep going. What about The Matrix? Same deal here. Movie 1, Neo fulfills his destiny, kills the agents, becomes the One, and leaves no unfinished business on the table. When Matrix Reloaded ends, Agent Smith is back and more powerful than ever, Neo is in a coma, the whole human race is in peril, and this shady guy with a mustache is definitely up to no good. True cliffhanger. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Unfinished business. Unresolved arcs. Jack got swallowed by a kraken. Cliffhanger. Kill Bill Volume 1. Same deal. Except there's no kraken. Okay, we get it. So we can all easily come up with great examples of cliffhangers in cinema. But if there's so many of them, why did I say that they are becoming a lost art? Well, because they are slowly but surely being replaced by something else. A great example is the Back to the Future trilogy. At the end of Back to the Future Part 2, the DeLorean gets struck by lightning and vanishes, trapping Doc Brown in the 1800s and Marty McFly in the 1950s. In an attempt to rescue his friend, Marty rushes off to the only person who can help him, 1955 Doc Brown, fresh off of sending Marty back home at the end of the first movie. Not only is this time travel gold, it's a great cliffhanger ending. The narrative hasn't been resolved yet, nor have the characters' arcs. Both of these carry on and culminate in Back to the Future Part 3. Throughout Part 2, we see Doc become increasingly more jaded about time travel to the point where he regrets ever creating the time machine and contemplates destroying it. That arc carries over into Movie 3. It's unfinished business, that's a part of the main storyline. But, on the flip side of this, is Back to the Future Part 1. By the end of the film, Marty and Doc's story and character arcs are complete. Everything gets wrapped up. The McFlys are hot now, Biff is a pushover, and all is well. There's no unfinished business. The little bit at the end where Doc shows up and takes Marty and Jennifer to the future looks like a cliffhanger, but it's actually not. It's just a fun tag. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale didn't intend for this to be a trilogy at first. It wasn't until parts 2 and 3 were being finalized that the original was re-released with a to-be-continued card at the end. So Back to the Future Part 2's ending is an example of a cliffhanger, whereas Back to the Future Part 1's ending is not. No, Back to the Future Part 1's ending is an example of the cliffhanger's greatest nemesis. Allow me to introduce the tag. And tags are not necessarily bad. They're just much more common and much less satisfying. In recent years, particularly the past decade, two key factors came into play that slowly made the idea of true cliffhangers fade into the ether. Those two factors are the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the rise of serialized streaming shows. Since Netflix started putting out original shows and other streaming platforms followed suit, we've entered a new age of television, where every new show is a prestige series with a deeply serialized story. Any quick research on the history of television will tell you that this wasn't always the case. Stuff like Lost was lightning in a bottle when it came out because there was so little like it back then. If Lost had come out in 2022, it would have, pardon the pun here, gotten lost in the shuffle. People would have binged it and moved on. Now we live in a world of Stranger Things and Ted Lasso and The Mandalorian, shows that have changed the way we consume television. But their existence has also impacted the world of film. Big-budget, glossy, serialized stories can be told on the small screen now for half the cost and half the risk of a movie. But the way these shows are plotted out and produced doesn't quite adhere to the classic Scheherazade rule of a true cliffhanger. Shows are greenlit on a season-by-season basis, so unless you're something really brave like Westworld, RIP, you're going to end your plotline at the end of a season because that's just playing it safe. Look at something like the finale of Stranger Things Season 2. Will is back to normal, and the monsters have been defeated and the kids are having a dance. There's no unfinished business left in the plot. Sure, we see a tease that the Mind Flayer might still be alive, but like Back to the Future Part 1, that's just a tag. You could, theoretically, end the story right there and nothing would feel unresolved. It doesn't leave you in suspense because Season 3 wasn't a guarantee yet. The same goes for Wednesday. She solved the mystery and gets to leave the school she hates. The little bit where some unknown person starts texting her is just another tag. There's no more to this story, but there's a weird quasi-promise that they'll come up with more if, and only if, the studio says it's okay. In other words, a cliffhanger says, there's more, whereas a tag says, there's no more, but I can make up more if you put in another quarter. Streaming television has bombarded us with an epidemic of tags. Tags were fairly common before, but now? They are literally everywhere. There's probably a tag standing behind me right now. As big an MCU fan as I am, I'm the first to admit that 99% of the endings it gives us are not true cliffhanger endings, because this universe simply plays by different rules. It's a whole other animal. Ever since the post-credits scene of Iron Man 1, the MCU has practically built itself on a foundation of tags. The only difference is they stick them after the credits because it's just cooler and more fun that way, and that's pretty much their trademark now. To date, there have been 30 MCU movies, and almost all of them have done this. But of those 30 movies, only 2 of them actually end on true cliffhangers. Avengers Infinity War and Captain America the Winter Soldier. These are the only 2 films where the unfinished business and the suspenseful situations they end on are part of the film's main plotline, and not just tags added after the credits to hype the next movie. And since the MCU and streaming television are pretty much the 2 most popular forms of visual entertainment on the planet right now, it only makes sense that everything else will strive to imitate them in an attempt to latch onto that success. That happens all the time in the industry. It's nothing new. But it means that we're seeing more and more tags popping up in more and more movies and shows. Tags have become so popular, our brains have started to anticipate them, expect them, and in some extreme toxic Twitter cases, even demand them. For lack of a better comparison here, tags are giving us the same high as cliffhangers, but they're 100% risk-free because the studios never have to make good on those promises. True cliffhangers only happen when more is actually coming. The Force Awakens could end on the great cliffhanger that it did because there was no way Disney was not making an entire trilogy of new Star Wars movies. Netflix never has to reveal who's stalking Wednesday Addams because it has no bearing on the story that show told us. Disney never has to say what happens to that piece of symbiote because that symbiote has had no part to play in Peter Parker's saga. For studios, a tag is much easier to do, so it's much more common. And the more it happens, the more true cliffhangers fall by the wayside. Which, at last, brings us all the way back around to Avatar. For me, as a big fan of true cliffhangers, The Way of Water is extra special because it's a return to form. That story they told has to continue into Part 3. Quaritch is still alive. The family doesn't know what Spider did. Neytiri has gone to a dark place that is going to cause a whole heap of tension. The humans are still mistreating the shit out of Pandora. And Kiri has no idea that she's Blue Space Jesus yet. The story The Way of Water started telling is not over. James Cameron already has the next chapter on the way. And chapter, to really cap things off, is the key word here. After all, cliffhangers got their start in the literary world, so it's only fitting to tie it all up like this. Next time you watch a movie, if you're wondering if the end of the movie was a true cliffhanger or if it was a tag, all you have to do is ask yourself this one simple question. Does it feel like I just finished reading a book? Or does it feel like I just finished reading a chapter of a book? If the answer is the second one, then baby, welcome to Cliffhanger Town. Also, if you haven't watched the actual movie called Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone, you should see it because it absolutely slaps. So that's our cinematic lesson for the day. I hope we all learn a little something about cliffhangers, about tags, and about the differences between the two, and about why cliffhangers are clearly the better one, even though tags are fine too. Anyway, I'm Andrew Fantasia. Thank you so much for tuning in on Thumb Together today. I will see you all next time, and until then, adios.